bright spells. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Welcome back to Thursdays Off the Ball. Nathan with you this evening. We're going to talk about Gaelic football between now and 9 o'clock. We'll be chatting to Brendan Devaney in around about half an hour from now, looking ahead to Kerry against Dublin. Mike Quirk joining us as well. Shawnee Maguire coming up on the football show after he was called back into the Ireland squad today to talk about his brilliant couple of weeks on his return from injury. But coming up in a moment, Andy Dunne and Rory O'Connor alongside us in studio to dissect the Ireland team that is going to take on Scotland on Saturday. But Richie is alongside us. Plenty of live sport going on.
Yeah, and a hell of a win for Arsenal tonight as well, Nathan. 2-0 winners away to AC Milan in the first leg of their last 16 encounter in the Europa League. First half goals from Henrik Mkhitaryan and Aaron Ramsey, both laid on by Mesut Ozil, giving Arsenal a 2-0 victory, or ending that run of 4 straight defeats and inflicting first defeat on Milan since December the 23rd. So sizable win for them, as it was for Atletico Madrid at home to Lokomotiv Moscow. Saul Niguez, Diego Costa and Koke with the goals for them. They have 1 foot in the last 8. Surprising defeat though for Borussia Dortmund, going down 2-1 at home to Salzburg. The Kosovo international midfielder Valan Berisha with both goals for Salzburg tonight. Andre Schurrle keeping Dortmund interested in this one, while Lyon have won 1-0 away to CSKA in Moscow. It's Marcelo who has gotten the goal for them. As we mentioned earlier, there were 5 new call-ups, among them Declan Rice to the Republic of Ireland squad for the friendly with Turkey, which will take place in Antalya on the 23rd of this month. And big news in the world of racing tonight as well, that being Sizing John ruled out of the Cheltenham Gold Cup next week. That is due to a hairline fracture to the pelvis, ruling the 8-year-old out of defending his title there, Prestbury Park. Ruby Walsh, we should mention as well, made a winning return to the saddle today on Arena, the 11-8 favourite in the 2-mile maiden hurdle at Thurles. While in the golf, the Valspar Championship ongoing in Florida at the moment, we mentioned a terrible round earlier on of 74 for Rory McIlroy. He's 3 over par after his opening round. Seamus Power is 5 over. He shot a 76 today. Currently out on course, Shane Lowry is 1 under par through 8 holes. Through 7 holes is Graham Toll. He's 1 over. And Padraig Harrington has 8 holes remaining of his opening round. He is 2 over par. Just out of interest, Tiger Woods currently
just
1
out of interest. Just only interest.
1 under par, Nathan. 1 under par is Tiger.
What's
He's doing okay. 4 under par. Kerry Connors, the Canadian, the surprise leader there on 4 under. He is 1 shot clear of Hui Kim and also Kelly Craft, and then they've got Robert Knox and Nick Watney in there on 3 under par as well. So it's a tight leaderboard, as they say.
Alright, plenty more to come from Richie throughout the evening, but it's time for a very special Thursday Night Rugby.
The Six Nations on Off the Ball with Vodafone. Official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Richie very nearly took our PPI award with him. I know we got lots of them, but hey, don't like to smash them up. They cost a lot of money. Rory O'Connor of the Irish Independent and Andy Dunne of Andy Dunne Enterprises is in studio with us. How are you? So the team has been named and Tyke Furlong returns back in the front row. The one surprise maybe from earlier in the week is that there is no Ian Henderson. He's been left on the bench, so the second row partnership on change. James Ryan and Devon Toner. As expected, Garry Ringrose comes into the centre. Rory, you were down in Carton House today for the team announcement. Like, Henderson, was this a genuine surprise that he didn't come straight back in?
Yeah, I think most people predicting the team today in this morning's papers were off the mark with it. It was, including myself, I expected him to come straight back into the team. He's been really influential in the games he's played for Ireland this season. But I wonder, is Schmidt looking at a slightly longer game in terms of being able to change it up for Twickenham next week? It's a vote of confidence to Devon Toner, who has played very well. I think is in a decent frame of form. And young James Ryan just seems immovable in that second row at the moment, despite his inexperience. So I was surprised by it. I think a lot of people were. And
is there a bit of mind games as well that Schmidt, while we often say they're enforced changes, that he likes to suggest to the players, if you do get your chance and you do come in, you do perform well, you can keep your place?
Yeah, there's a bit of that, and I think there's a bit of also, I watched a lot of last year's first game back this morning, and Ireland's finish was pretty poor. Their bench gave them very little, so I think Ian Henderson coming off the bench with 30 minutes to go offers a nice change up. I mean, he'll bring a lot to the team. And I think that's been, Ireland have been pretty poor off the bench. Not pretty poor off the bench, but they've finished games poorly. They've struggled at times in recent weeks, in recent games. So I think that's part of it as well.
We are on facebook.com/off the ball as well if you want to leave any comments. Our Six Nations coverage on Off the Ball is with thanks to Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. What are your thoughts on it, Andy, the decision then to stick with Devin Toner?
I was surprised and I got it wrong too. I thought Henderson would go straight back in. I think of the three players, the two best rugby players are Ryan and Henderson in terms of general play and ability around the field and athleticism. They've both, Ian Henderson and Devin, have been in charge of calling the line out, which is a complex task at the best of times in any professional team, let alone international level. And I do think he's probably kind of plump for the bit of experience in Devon. There's a craft and there's an experience that you need to acquire when you're calling the line out at international level in terms of how you read the situations. They've probably got anything up to 80 plus calls. They've got to take into account what the opposition defence are doing, all in kind of a live, instantaneous feedback.
About Ian Henderson's ability to do that?
Well, I'd just say he's probably less experienced than Devon at it. I actually thought he'd possibly even look at Henderson and Toner even because they've played together a lot more. But I don't think you can argue against Ryan based on how good he's been. So again, it's probably a horses for courses thing. I think you're spot on in the sense Joe has probably said the guy has taken his opportunity and deserves it, and it's going to give Henderson one almighty kind of kick up the arse. And I'd imagine when he comes into the team, which he will probably for the last 20-25, we can expect something special from him because he is a special player.
Is that something that does come into Joe Schmidt's mindset? We often talk now about finishers, the lack of impact off the bench, that bringing a Devin Toner on with 15-20 minutes is never going. He's going to do his job, but maybe you're not going to get this ferocious impact. Whereas with Ian Henderson, you probably are.
He's never really gone for impact as such off the bench. He's always gone. I mean, if you remember one of the seasons when they won the Six Nations, I think it was 2015. Felix Jones was always picked on the bench, and it was much more kind of, what were perceived as being exciting impact players that could have worn that number 23.
It's a pragmatic decision.
But it was the more he'd come on, he'd make really good tackles, he'd make defensive impacts, he'd be a really good organiser, and the performance levels wouldn't drop with him. But Ireland have, in their last 4 games, they've lost the final quarter in 3 of them, and they only shaded Italy 14-12 in the other one. So I think he's looking for energy, and the energy that Ian Henderson can bring, the distribution. He did speak a little bit about the fact that he can't, if he brings Andrew Porter off the bench, Porter gets injured, he can bring Furlong back off. That second row, he can't do that. There's a difference between props, and he goes into real levels of minutiae when he's making these decisions. He works out all these scenarios, probably a little bit too much, because there's so much upside in some of his other selections. So I think there's a little bit of I don't think he's gone Eddie Jones. He hasn't changed the word on the team sheet anyway. I mean, they're not call finishers officially, but I think he would like a bit more from them. He'd like a bit more from his bench.
Is he trying to drown you in detail when he's giving those kind of answers? That instead of, listen, I've made a straight up selection decision, he's going so in depth about it. Actually, everyone loves that because it gives you a load of content. But really, he's just made a straightforward. It's not
very usable content. It's usually down a blind alley. But no, I think he does genuinely sit. I think he thinks long and hard about decisions. I don't think anyone thinks about these decisions more than Joe. He just goes into what would happen if I lost this guy and this guy, what would this guy do? It's levels of detail that none of us even countenance, and he gets it right most of the time. His selections are generally on the money. You would like to see more impact off the bench, and Henderson gives you that, but you probably lose that over the first 50-60 minutes because I don't think Toner gives you what he gives you. What he does give you is unbelievable line-out work, and Scotland picked Ireland's line-out apart last season, and it was a major part of that defeat.
With your physio hat on, any concerns right now with Tadhg Furlong coming back in?
No, because I think the medical team will have considered that. They're superb, they're knowledgeable, and if I think there was any risk around it, it was obviously a milder tear. He would have had imaging done, he would have had MRI scans, he had anything up to isokinetic testing, any kind of stuff done to ensure they felt it was the right call. I think if there was any kind of shred of doubt, he would have benched or not even been involved at all.
Is there a way for Scotland to test that? Or is that just something, if it's going to go in open play?
Yeah, well, I suppose the way Scotland play is going to test it because they move the ball
He's gonna
around a
have
lot.
to sprint.
He ain't going to be. Yeah, he's not going to be too static. He's an incredible tight head. He's a first receiver in attack half the time. Apart from winning the scrums, shoring up rucks, lifting well on the line out. He's a pretty dynamic tight head. So I think he'll naturally test it himself. And the way Scotland play with such speed on the ball and pace and width, he's going to be tested. Yeah, and I don't think any of the medical team would have taken that decision lightly. They've been well informed.
And I think they would have taken the week if they needed it, because I think they could beat Scotland without him, whereas Twickenham's a different matter. Even though the English scrum hasn't been brilliant in this campaign, I think they would have erred on the side of caution and given them that week if they needed it, because Porter did so well last time.
Despite Ireland scoring tries for fun, there has been criticism about the style of play from Joe Schmidt's side. He was asked about that today and he said people need to do some more homework.
I'd probably challenge people to do a little bit more homework and probably not follow the lead of someone who statistically doesn't balance up with what's said. I think there was some really good tight play and some stuff that went through the middle, but there was some stuff down the edges as well. Keith Earl's line break, Johnny's line break, Jacob Stockdale in the corner. Certainly that wasn't a 1+ play. It's two of the best passes you'd see in World Rugby. So, I think we've got to keep that variety to our game. I think at this stage we've probably made the third most offloads. It's an area where people have loved to beat us with a stick, and it's probably overlooked by people that there is some continuity through our play. So those sorts of things should allow us the variety to try to keep a balance in what we're doing to attack.
Yeah, if you're watching on Facebook, very interesting from Joe Schmidt, but also interesting the way that Rob Kearney in his 30s still just flexing. Dave McIntyre on off the ball pose is what we like to call it. Just letting the young lads know that they're still there. Who's he having a pop at there, Joe Schmidt? Who needs to do their homework?
He certainly wasn't happy with Warren Gatlin's comments about Ireland's attacking play, and I know Neil Francis described Ireland's style of play as Warren ball this morning, so it wouldn't surprise me if that irked Joe as well. For all that he says, he doesn't keep an eye on these things. I think he reads everything, so it's probably
absolutely does.
He's 100%
He's very, very conscious of what's written and said, and he bristles when it's critical. He kind of tongue in cheek, but he's saying people ought to do more homework. I think an area for his own game would be for him to do slightly less homework and give his players a bit more freedom. That's what the argument is, that we've got probably one of the greatest teams of the last 20 to 30 years. We're 3 deep in most positions in terms of personnel, and there's a huge amount of talent, and he is very much the controlling type of coach who will be prescriptive, and I think there is a value in looking at taking the reins off at times, not all the time, but occasionally, and saying players can be a bit more expressive. I think that's where he's probably bristling a bit, in the sense, the stats don't lie, but the stats don't show style, and the style in which we're doing things is very, very wearing on players. It's physically demanding, and I think it also has a slight effect, or if not a greater than slight effect, on our defence. Our defence looks tired, and I think it's because of the hell amount of work we're doing in attack. Wales and Scotland are scoring with relative ease and relative, at far less effort with 1/3 of the ball. We're scoring by being belligerent, and we're physically dominating teams, and we're being effective, but I don't know how sustainable it is.
Do you reckon our midfield partnership will change that up a bit this week, because you no longer have Farrell or Henshaw, who are both big, strong ball carriers. You've now got the more nuanced Garry Ringrose, so you would imagine, I thought Joe built the Wales game plan around the fact that Chris Farrell, for all that he was brilliant, is quite limited, or certainly didn't want to put too much on him. They wanted him to carry hard and do the basics very well, and he did them very well. But you put Garry Ringrose in your midfield, he gives you a more distributing option. I mean, he can step in for Johnny when I think Ireland are missing a second distributor, which Joey Carbery. Does he
want a second distributor?
I think if he hadn't, I think Jarrod Payne played fullback, he'd take him. But Jarrod Payne's, he was at training today, but he's not. Jarrod Payne's is unlikely to be playing in the season anyway. I think if he had someone who could do it, I don't think he'd turn his nose up at the option, but I think he prefers big centres. But Ringrose, I think, gives you that option to step in for Johnny and get the game going.
Before you answer that, Andy, let's hear what Schmidt had to say about Garry Ringrose and what he can bring despite the lack of game time.
Yeah, there's always concerns about players for different reasons, and I think Gary's only had 6 games in this entire season. So, that's something that you calculate in. At the same time, sometimes you don't have the luxury of a plethora of options. I think Garry Ringrose has been extraordinary when he has played for us. He's done an incredible job. The last time he did play for us in Japan, he was absolutely outstanding in the back line along with Keith Earls. They were 2 of the real standouts for us. So we're hoping he can hit the ground running and get straight back into that form. He's a smart player. Hopefully that allows him to kind of keep a balance between when he has to work hard and when he can just regenerate a little bit on the pitch, and that will allow him to extend his match minutes to 80 quality minutes for us.
Is it a concern though that, once again you're having to replace a player who's such a key position in the defensive line, it's the 3rd time in the championship?
Yeah, of course it is, especially when Robbie Henshaw is world class and Chris Farrell slotted in so well last time. As I said, it's a needs must situation, but it's a situation where we've got a lot of trust and a lot of faith in Garry.
Yeah, so that's Joe Schmidt talking about Garry Ringrose. So follow up there, Andy, on what Rory was saying and what Garry Ringrose can add and change from 2 weeks ago.
I think he can break the game up just as an individual runner. He can. He's quite slight, I suppose, in terms of a typical Chris Farrell or Bundy Aki modern day international centre. Ringrose, if you stand beside him, he's not too slight, but relative to those guys on the field, he's not a bulky guy. He's a bit of a throwback to the old sidestepping evasive centres. So he's electric speed. I think he's great courage when he attacks and in defence. He's great work ethic. So I love him as a player. I think he's a brilliant addition. I think what's really exciting is that he's playing outside Aki, who is probably one of our strongest backs in terms of getting his hands free in the tackle and getting the ball away. It's a brilliant way to attack. Where I might have been critical of the Irish attack in the past is that there's not that capacity to be impulsive or instinctive, but Aki doesn't really play by those rules no matter who his coach is. He'll try and wriggle and get his arms free, and if he can, someone like Ringrose on the end of a little pass out the back door from Aki could be lethal.
Are there no concerns about the fact he's only played 6 games this year? And you made a really good point a couple of weeks back on Monday Night Rugby with Eddie, where everyone was rushing to get Garry Ringrose back into the centre because we have this undisputed star waiting in the wings. And you were making about, actually, if you've watched him during his few appearances this year, he hasn't really been at the level that we saw 12 months ago. He hasn't really had the time. He hasn't had the game time to get himself back into that sort of form. Yeah,
he had a very serious shoulder operation in June and was slow coming back to season, and players always talk about how important pre-season is for him. He missed pre-season, he's come back in and he's been playing catch up, and just as he was starting to catch up, he had an ankle injury, so he's had 1 game since that ankle injury, and he made a number of defensive errors that he wouldn't have made last season. I remember the Montpellier game in particular. He struggled. I think Ulster, before he went off, he had a few bad reads as well. He's undeniably, I agree with everything Andy said. I think he's a top quality player, but I don't think if Robbie Henshaw and Bundy Aki were fit this season, Garry was going to break in. I think maybe Joe was looking at him more as a number 23 because he can cover the wings as well. He's got his opportunity now. He's had a bit of time to kind of, I presume, review the games where things were going a little bit wrong for him. He's probably had time to build up his upper body while he was rehabbing the ankle, so the shoulder's probably feeling a bit stronger. So you'll hope that he's able to hit the ground running. But there's an element of doubt there about his defence, and this game was one where he was exposed last season. It was his Six Nations debut, and Scotland got around the outside of him a couple of times. They get around the outside of a lot of teams. Stuart Hogg's just electric. But there are a little bit of fears for him there. He doesn't have a huge amount of experience with Stockdale. He played a bit in the summer tour with him. He's never played with Aki before, so you throw him in there, you throw him into the system that hasn't been perfect, that defensive system. So yeah, there are concerns, but we've had concerns about Ireland in pretty every round of this tournament so far, and they've answered every one of them. So you kind of hope that the time under Joe on the training pitch that they've invested in him will come to fruition.
Aki is still young in international terms, in terms of experience, but he's been around the block. Do we need to see a little bit more leadership from him in that role when there are such inexperienced players alongside him? Does he need to be a bit more vocal, say with Stockdale in particular?
I don't think vocal is the issue with Bunny. I think maybe sometimes his decision making, particularly in the first 20 minutes against Wales, he was pulled out of position for a couple of times where he shouldn't have been. That's something that he is an individualistic kind of player who plays on the cuff a little bit, and that doesn't really suit the Irish system. I'd like to see more of him in attack, actually. I'd like to see more of what Andy was talking about, freeing his hands, breaking the gain line a bit, just making those plays. With Connacht, he just steps up because he's so important to Connacht. They rely on him so much to make plays, but he invariably does it. I think with Ireland, he's still playing within the system. You'd probably like to see him play more within the system in defence, and then break out of the system a little bit in attack.
I think if you look at the likes of James Lowe up in Leinster and a very kind of funny, entertaining interview he did last week, is I don't care what anyone really thinks of me and I'm going to do it my way. And it's a very Kiwi approach, because across the board, probably down for the last 8 to 10 seasons in New Zealand, they've been very much encouraging of players to hone their individual skills and use them on the field in a non-systematic way. And a guy like Aki coming up from a Super 15 experience, they don't really shake that off. They bring it with them, and it's a unique selling point that they bring. I think it's ironic that we've got guys in Ireland who can do it as well, but probably don't get the freedom to do it because they haven't been brought up in a system that does that. So therefore you guys have to buy in. We might make an exception for one or two guys, and I think Aki is allowed a bit more freedom at times to be expressive and do something that's a bit more outside the box.
I get the sense you feel that this is going to catch up at Ireland at some stage, and when we do lose a game, a big match, whether it's at Twickenham, whether it's this Saturday, or whether it's in a World Cup quarter final, that ultimately that lack of freedom, that we're so structured and we go back to bulldozing through sides so often, that ultimately it's not going to win us the very biggest games.
Well, I don't think it's I do think that, in short. I think it's a big worry. I mean, I think I would, when you think back to Jack Charlton's sides of the early 90s, late 80s, it was littered with talent, but they played Route 1 football and hit it up to Niall Quinn and Cascarino, and there's a lot of parallels where we look at the Irish team now is full of...
I don't know if you remember, but we really enjoyed Jack Charlton's Irish team.
I know, but I mean... we
partied.
We did, and I think we're doing the exact same thing right now, and we're all enjoying the success of it, but it's a team that's littered with talent, and I think it's a team that could be a better attacking side than we currently are, and also I think we could be a better defensive side on the flip on because of that, because you spend less time bludgeoning in attack, you're probably fresher and sharper in defence also. But it's just I suppose the stylistic thing that no one's going to care about if we go win a Grand Slam. To me, really, if we go to the next World Cup and we get a similar result with the personnel we have, it's got to be deemed to be a failure overall. But I'd love to just see a bit more freedom.
You're going to be throwing your pen across the studio.
Yeah, I'm turning into the real.
I don't think it's as reductive. I don't think it's as reductive as Jack Charlton. I think, I can see the limitations. I can see completely where you're coming from. I think the Charlton comparison is probably a little bit extreme.
Probably a bit harsh.
Can Schmidt not go here? Basic homework. Look at Jacob Stockdale's try ratio. Look at this tournament that Keith Earls is having.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about Ireland's attack in 2 weeks after Ireland scored 5 tries against Wales. I mean, but I think that the thing that comes from Ireland is that they're always trying to improve themselves. So, and that's the way they with the prism that we watch. I mean, Paul O'Connell won a Six Nations in 2014. Was interviewed on pitch and said we want to get better. It's like that's the prism they make us look at them through. So if they're never satisfied, then their fans, their media, can't be satisfied with them either. I do think, I completely agree. I think it came back to haunt them in the Argentina game in 2015. It was actually it was Luke coming on and showing a bit of flair and just off the cuff stuff that probably brought Ireland back into that game. I definitely think there is a concern.
I suppose you got to understand why Joe Schmidt were getting incredibly sick of listening to people being critical when they got 5 tries against Wales. And I noticed he said there was some of the best passes you'd seen in international rugby, and obviously he's alluding to Sexton and that pass to Stockdale. The thing of interest to me was, if Sexton had nailed his first 3 kicks, he actually became impulsive on the field because he was under pressure, because he said, I got to drag this out of the fire here, I'm letting the team down. He started running the ball from deep, which is not his favoured approach tactically. He ran it from deep and suddenly we were loose in attack and we looked really, really dangerous. I don't think it was by design, I think it was by reaction. I think Johnny said, I got to do something for the team. The type of player he actually is, I think he's arguably a better player when he's instinctive than when he's really cerebral and thinking about it. I think Rog was a more cerebral, stay in the pocket, kick the corners type out half, but Johnny has an attacking physical game that when the shackles are off, Leinster Northampton coming out second half under Joe Schmidt and changed the entire game in terms of how that wasn't pre-planned, that was instinctive, and I think we need to allow it to come out a bit more often.
And just I do think that it's partly the tools that he has at his disposal, and I think with James Ryan, with James Ryan in Henderson ball playing second rows, Tyke Furlong and Andrew Porter both passing, I think he will develop it a little bit. I think he'll give them more freedom because he trusts them more, and I think with Jordan Larmour, he is mad to get Jordan Larmour into this. People that
Larmour is in the squad.
He's in the squad. I didn't see that. I didn't necessarily see that coming earlier in the week. I mean, Fergus didn't have a great cameo against Wales, but still he is the more probably sensible choice, the more pragmatic choice, and he's gone with Larmour. I think we'll see him I think Larmour will make more strides in Australia. He wants to get him in, and I don't think you put shackles on Jordan Larmour. I think you let Jordan Larmour be Jordan Larmour. I think Joe Schmidt will do that as well, because he can see the benefit of that as well.
Yeah, I think I mentioned before, it was a bit like Jose Mourinho's Manchester United. It does remind me of the start of the season when United are beating every team 3-4-0, yet still you don't look at them and think they're this great attacking force or anything like that. They're just sort of grinding it out, and eventually it did catch up with them. Finn Russell, I suspect you're a fan.
I mean, I love when it's going well from, when you've got a guy who's always described as mercurial, it's a big question mark.
Were you described as mercurial?
I was, and there were legitimate question marks over me as well. He had some sublime moments in that England game, so he's great to watch. But similarly, he single-handedly has caused them a defeat in the tournament already. So he's... it's interesting to see they've gone for that two distributors axis with Peter Horn. He's got a kind of a calming influence inside him in Laidlaw, and he's obviously got the electric Hugh Jones outside him, who I also love as a player. And I don't think Ireland will be caught a second time on the back of what Russell can do, because they got caught cold up in Edinburgh last year, where he took it to the line and whipped these passes out into Ringrose's channel. Actually, Garry Ringrose got a little bit of harsh criticism in that, because the inside defence was also held by Russell, and therefore Ringrose can't just abandon ship and run out to the wings. He's got to stay in his system. But Russell kind of nailed this for the first 15-20 minutes of that game. He did very, very similar to England last week, and knowing Joe and his one of his great positives being his preparation, I just can't see it happening again.
That Dan Levy's job?
Partly, yeah. I think it's the line speed. It's Andy Farrell's job, really, and Andy Farrell has been showered with love from Joe since that Wales game, which makes you feel like behind the scenes maybe Andy's getting a bit of heat, and but like, he's conceded 3 tries.
World class.
He's conceded 3. Like, his defence has conceded 3 tries against Italy and Wales in the last 2 games. That's not. He won't see that as good enough. I think it's 10 of his 19 games in charge.
You don't really think of that dynamic at all when we think of Joe's review sessions where he's ripping players apart. You never overly think of the dynamic of what are the conversations like between Schmidt and Farrell.
I'd love to be flying the wall for that. Yeah. I don't think Andy takes much
pretty strong character.
Yeah. So I think Andy knows himself as well. I mean, that's the shortcoming that they need to address the most, and Scotland will test it to the limit because they can do it. But I think Dan Levy needs to get up in his face. I think they all do. I think they need to get off the line.
What does he not like? Does he not like people getting in his face? Mentally, can you get at him?
Russell? Yeah, absolutely. I'd imagine he a guy unleashed on him like Levy. I'm not quite sure. Has Russell just got this kind of metal about him that can produce it routinely? I just think he's a very creative, talented guy who will come and go as depending on what side of bed he got out of. That's the type of player he looks like, and he hasn't changed in 3 seasons. I've seen him play games in Europe very, very similarly, and I was over at the Munster game last year where he completely bottled it for a drop goal, and he ran out the back 8. It was absolutely clean for him to go and get that drop goal to change the game, and he bottled it. So he's there are no question marks over his talent. I think the question marks are over his consistency, and that's the case, I'd send a guy after him like Levy.
He's enjoying himself. He seems to be very opposite of Johnny Sexton. He's slightly
Gavin Hastings in here yesterday who made that exact point, that he plays the game with a smile on his face, where Johnny plays the game like he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders.
Which suits Johnny. I think Johnny thrives under that pressure, whereas Russell I don't know if he could take it or leave it. That's probably disrespectful to him. But he he's off to Paris next season and on the big contract. He's smiling during the anthems. That can be held against him. It's probably unfair. But I think if Ireland flood the channels around them and force him into a couple of early mistakes, then I think that that's half the battle. You pressurise the breakdown, dirty the ball for Laidlaw. I thought Laidlaw was awful on the Lions tour. He's a different player when he plays for Scotland, but still he can be pressurised. So I think they'll look at putting pressure on set piece, basically slow down the ball, slow down the supply, flood the channels around them, and stop them getting those wide passes away. Because if they get those wide passes away, Ireland will be in trouble.
Scotland do have an absolutely woeful record away from home in recent times, and don't want to get carried away. There is a definite possibility that Ireland could win the championship this weekend with a bonus point win, and England failing to do that over in France. With all that in mind and everything we've said, what are your predictions, Rory?
I think Ireland will win. I'm pretty convinced of it. I was watching a lot of Scotland this morning has put a few doubts in my mind, but I think that the fundamentals of Ireland's game are too strong at home, and there's too many question marks about the Scotland team, who will cause problems. But I think Ireland will win and win comfortably. Whether they get the bonus point, I'm not sure. Whether England will even win in Paris, I'm not sure about that either. But I think they'll do enough to have one hand on the trophy by Saturday night.
Andy?
Yeah, I think we'll squeeze the life out of them physically, and I think we'll win much in the same style with the type of tries we scored against Wales, where we kind of bludgeoned through them deep in their territory, and we're relentless. I can see us doing the exact same thing against Scotland and being successful with it.
Alright, good stuff. Thanks for coming in, lads. All our Six Nations coverage on Off the Ball is with thanks to Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. Quick break and we're back talking Gaelic football.
Off the Ball
On News Talk.
Every Friday on the Moncrief Show, we do movies. And